So, essential idea, all in red. Again, back to ventilation. Lungs are actively ventilated. What that means is compared to a fish who simply swims through the water to produce that ventilation effect of moving oxygen, oxygenated water across the surface, you are going to have to do something actively, pump it in and pump it out. Okay, so what that does, again, they tell you what it does, so they're going to ask you, what does ventilation accomplish? To maintain a concentration gradient of oxygen and carbon dioxide between the respiratory medium, the air, which is now in the alveoli, the transport location, and the blood that's right across those thin capillary walls and those type 1 pneumocyte cell wall, or cell membranes, not cell walls, mistake there. Okay, so here's what we might do, because they say this is something that, you know, they're not going to ask you to do on your test, but this is very easy. We can get some people to run around and we can monitor their ventilation rate. I actually have some little things called spirometers that we might use. We have to be careful now in this COVID world. Or you can simply like look and see how much they're breathing by simple observation. That's what that means. Ventilation rate, that's easy. How many times per minute do you inhale and exhale, right? And tidal volume. See, they say this word here should be measured, but the terms vital capacity and residual volume are not expected. I'll tell you what they are real fast. Although I forget off the top of my head what vital capacity is. So anyway, tidal volume is easy. What's tide like? It's just like the tides in the ocean. It's in and out. So in a normal breath, that's a key to this definition. In a normal breath, right, how much air comes in and out? What volume? That's the tidal volume. Okay. When you exhale, especially just normally, there is still some volume residing in your lungs. So when you exhale, we'll all practice this in class. When you exhale, if you said ready, set, go, you could push some more air out of your lungs. You could exhale some more. That's residual volume, right? And then vital capacity, I forget what that definition is. I'll let you look it up. Okay, so here's how things like us ventilate their lungs, get air in and out. It's referred to as negative pressure breathing because we got physics involved now. Muscle action is going to cause the volume of the rib cage and the chest cavity. Okay, so this is that part of your body that's also called your coelom. That's the space between your body wall and your body organs. This is the coelom, right? So since there's some space there, we can expand this big part, your lungs, into that space and make it bigger. This is just like a hypodermic needle. There's the needle part, right? You've got a little kind of a stopper there, and then you've got it attached to like a plunger. And if you pull this way, right, you have increased the volume of this space from that to that. What happens when you increase the volume? You produce negative pressure. This needle has it's hollow and it's got a hole in it. And when you create negative pressure by doing this, it's going to pull air in that little hole. And your syringe, right, the thing that doctors put medicine in to inject in you, whatever, your syringe fills up, right? This is what negative pressure breathing is. So just like this, you and I are just like this. We have a muscle that's kind of just like this, that little stopper part of this plunger system. We have a muscle called the diaphragm. And when that muscle contracts, it gets shorter, and that causes it to pull down, just like this pulling down. What happens in our analogy, right? Your trachea is the needle, and your mouth and your nose are the little hole at the end of the needle, and air gets sucked in due to negative pressure. Make sense? We have increased the volume of the chest cavity, just like we increase the volume of this part of the syringe, right? And we have sucked air into it. Now, what else increases the volume of the chest cavity? Well, besides pulling the floor down, so to speak, we can also pull the walls out with some of the muscles that are attached to our ribs. So this also, you know this, what happens when you take a deep breath, your ribs expand. Not just your diaphragm drops, but your ribs expand. And so that involves a couple sets of rib muscles, which are exactly the thing you're eating when you're eating the ribs of an animal. You're eating the muscles in between the ribs. Costal is a rib word. So these muscles are called intercostal muscles. They're between the ribs. And you have a layer outside and a layer inside. And I'm just going to go quickly because this is in green ink coming up. If we were doing this as an option, they would want you to know those two muscles and what they do. Nope. Oh, look at that. I have to take it back. It's in red ink. Sorry, I thought this was in green ink. But here, they might ask you this. External intercostals, those would be on the outer side of your ribs, right? And internal intercostals on the inner part of your ribs and your diaphragm all can make that chest cavity bigger, right? So they want you to also be able to use them as specific examples of antagonistic muscle action. We're going to get the muscles later in probably our next unit or the one after that. We're going to throw it in with nervous system stuff, but here's this muscle that we call your bicep muscle, right? It attaches to some of your arm bones. And if you contract it, this arm bone gets pulled. Actually, if you contract it, sorry, this arm bone in your forearm gets pulled up like that. But then you got muscles over here. These are called your triceps. There's 3 of them. I'll just make one. They're attached to this thing down here. When you contract this one and make it shorter, this pulls this bone this way. Antagonistic. This muscle makes the movement go that way. This muscle makes the movement go the other way. So these are also antagonistic. One set of contractions will cause your rib cage to expand. That's if your diaphragm contracts and drops the floor, right? And if your external intercostal muscles, if you can picture this, here's your ribs, you know. If the muscles that are connecting the outside of ribs contract, it'll pull them outward and also expanding your chest cavity. When the internal intercostal muscles contract, they'll pull your ribs closer together. And when the diaphragm relaxes and the floor moves up again because it relaxes, because this diaphragm muscle is normally curved. I forgot to say that. That's important. It's curved like that when it's relaxed. It's attached on the sides. And when it contracts and gets shorter, then that's why it also drops, right? So relaxed diaphragm, relaxed externals, and contracted internals, that is the exhaling mechanism. You are pulling air in, negative pressure, when you contract the external intercostals and the diaphragm, and then you push it out when you relax those two and contract the internals. So since it's in red, they might ask you that, and this is one where they might ask you to describe it, 3 or 4 points worth of description. So you need to be well enough with it not to answer just a multiple choice question about it. Okay. So this is also kind of the general stuff that we had, but look at this. Thorax. We haven't said that word, and I don't think it showed up before, but there it is in the syllabus, and that means they expect you to know what thorax means. That's the part of your body we more commonly call the chest, right? You have it turns out 2 cavities, okay? So here, this will be Joey again, okay, with his face is in his dog's butt. So that's Joey again. So you have two cavities. What separates those two cavities? Your diaphragm. That's like across the middle. Your thoracic cavity is the one that's got your lungs and also your heart, right? And that's why a thoracic surgeon is a chest surgeon, a heart-lung kind of surgeon, right? But then your guts, most of your digestive tract is in this cavity, which is simply called your abdominal cavity, right? Which is why these muscles above it are called abdominal muscles or abs, right? Those are your six-pack. That's Joey's six-pack. Okay. So I'll show that in class too, but not right now. This I said already, and we're gonna probably, time permitting, and I think we do cut more time this year than last year. We're gonna maybe do a lab in this, and we'll have to pay attention to COVID stuff. So what do you think the concentration of oxygen would be in the air in your alveoli right after you took a big breath? You took a big breath and sucked in that oxygen in the atmosphere. That's about 21% oxygen, or that, most of it's nitrogen, right? And nitrogen doesn't really do much biologically. But how much do you think, more or less? I'll let you ponder on that. We'll talk about it in class. This is really neat. I'm going to show this in class. This is outside the syllabus, but this is a really neat technology stuff. So now, I threw this in here with the animals, back to the animals for a little bit. This is kind of neat, and this is possible maybe, because they're not too specific about it. Although, to be honest, I haven't got to the IB syllabus yet part about classification of animals, so this might come up, and we'll see this picture again. But look how birds have evolved. This is very neat, okay? They have evolved that when they inhale, they take air in, and a dose of it goes into their lungs, oxygenated air. But then another dose goes in this sac, and it sits there. And this sac doesn't have any oxygen diffuse out. So this is a dose of still oxygenated air that's sitting in this sac, simply called an air sac, right? And then when they exhale, the air goes out of their lungs, the air that's dropped off its oxygen, and their lungs get a fresh dose of oxygenated air on the exhale, as well as what they got on the inhale. This would be really neat because it's obviously very efficient, okay? Its lungs also have evolved to not have alveoli, but they have these little things called parabronchi. And again, that word might be in the syllabus later when we get to birds compared to, mammals and whatever, but I'll just introduce it here. So what does this let you do? Well, one thing it lets you do is you can fly really high where the oxygen concentration is less in the upper atmosphere, and you can still be okay because your lungs are like getting a double dose of oxygen with each breath. They get it on the inhale and they get it on the outhale, the exhale, the outhale. I just made up a word. So what also that does is if you're getting more oxygen, you can have a high respiratory rate, right? And you can do all that activity of flying because you're delivering more oxygen to your cells than your normal lumbering run-of-the-mill human being.